Among fans of anime and manga, some titles forever remain in the forefront of conversation. Here in the United States, if you were to say the names Cowboy Bebop or Evangelion, you're almost guaranteed to get a warm reception from fans of these timeless classics. And rightfully so, these are typically considered a must-watch on anyone's anime list. With their lasting popularity, people tend to assume that everyone has already watched these shows. But is that really the case? In truth, there's a growing gap between the anime of yesterday and the anime fan of today. The mid-2000s mark a time where anime production reached new standards, and with it, new IPs being localized for the Western audience. In their heyday, these shows were popular amongst nearly all anime fans. But with how far anime has come, the reality is that there's a new wave of fans who regularly consume anime now, but were never exposed to some of these knockout titles from the past then. One such title is Deathnote. Deathnote is a very unique series when compared to your typical shonen titles, especially those found in Jump where it was originally serialized. While most shonen stories are about great adventures against some evil force and overcoming adversity through the power of friendship and determination, Deathnote's plot instead takes the viewer for a ride alongside Light Yagami, a Japanese student prodigy who comes across a notebook that offers him the power to kill anyone just by writing their name in it. Recognizing the seemingly limitless potential of this power, Light resolves to use it to kill criminals who he deems to be unfit for society. As his killings start to become noticed by the media and law enforcement, he earns the nickname Kira, and soon finds himself caught in a juggling act of fulfilling his will to change the world while also remaining inconspicuous as possible as he lives his life as a student. An exploration into the effects of man being corrupted by seemingly infinite power over others, Deathnote takes the viewer through Light's thought process as he faces down the many challenges that come his way. Most notably, his efforts to elude detection by the investigators who want him captured, all the while seeing his own grandiose self-image grow as he nurtures his god complex. It goes without saying that Light is not your typical hero. Sure, he's a hero in his own eyes and those who recognize his work as a universal good, but in the eyes of the law, Kira's actions are heinous and unjust. They defy due process and justice as defined by society, and for this, Kira must be captured and punished for his crimes against humanity. The journey through the mind of a killer is certainly not exclusive to Deathnote. I personally found a lot of overlap with Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. The paranoia, the countermeasures, the balance of one's own conscience, all these things come into play as the narrative of Deathnote plays out. Nonetheless, the meat of the narrative is definitely rooted in the mind games that take place. While many different characters play part in the battle against Kira, one particular character whose role raises the stakes to entirely new heights is L, the world's greatest detective. L's interest in the Kira case pressures Light in completely new ways, and despite the limited information that L has, his methods and deductive reasoning are enough to constantly place Light in a state of defense. The mental gymnastics that take place during the Kira investigation are without a doubt some of the most gripping and stimulating for the viewer, and as each of these characters becomes more and more integral to the story, it becomes unclear exactly who you should be rooting for. While there are many things I could say to further this synopsis, I think it's far more important to let people experience it for themselves. The twists and turns of Light's journey as Kira are without a doubt the main draw of the series, even more so when viewed alongside L's own initiatives to counteract him. For this reason, I will not spend any more time talking about the plot, but will instead highlight some of the other strengths that I think make Deathnote a must-watch. Firstly, how it looks. The visual style of Deathnote offers an interesting blend of modern era alongside intermittent gothic themes. There are countless shots across the series that have stuck with me over the 10 years since I first watched the show, and I think that speaks volumes about how masterfully they were executed. It's worth noting that the anime was directed by Tetsuo Araki of Attack on Titan fame, and the studio behind its production was Madhouse, whose legacy includes knockout titles like Trigun, Wolf Children, and One Punch Man. Of course, for most people, the first impression of an anime comes from the OP, and I believe that Deathnote's openings and endings are complete bangers, both visually and musically. Maybe even some of the best ever made. Looking at the series as a whole, its gothic themes coupled with the visual kei and heavy metal stylings of its opening and ending themes always bring me back to Hot Topic stores in the mid-2000s, and I mean that in the most positive way that I can. The last thing I'll say about Deathnote's visual style is the excellent use of color. Shades of red and blue are the most significant when it comes to symbolism, particularly to represent the different sides of the conflict. I really cannot stress how much of a visual response this show evokes when those strong hues come to the forefront. Absolute eye candy. One of the things I mentioned before was the strength of Deathnote's characters, and among them are several standouts. Just as iconic as Light is the appearance of Ryuk, a god of death who's responsible for bringing the Death Note to the human world. As a consequence of owning the Death Note, Light is cursed to be haunted by Ryuk so long as he still has it. Despite his title, Ryuk is not a malicious being. He was just bored and looking for something to do. In many ways, Ryuk is an extension of the viewer, treating the entire experience as a spectacle for him to watch and maintaining relative objectivity from the events around him. While he does answer some of life's questions and occasionally will strike a deal or lend a hand, he really is just there to watch things unfold as the observer. To him, it's just entertainment. Outside of Light and Ryuk, every character has some sort of part to play in the grand scheme of things, and those who stick around during the story feel decently fleshed out for the most part, though some are definitely far more important than others. Each of these characters with their own respective moral codes and obligations contribute a great deal to the overall experience, even if they come across more like bystanders half the time, forced to watch while L or Light make the decisive moves. A lot of the time, these characters will serve as pawns for the main players in the story, fulfilling their respective goals, and don't really serve much function aside from that. But the few times they get to take the stage, it does feel like there's something significant behind them, even if we won't get to see it. Another strength of this series is the OST. Aside from having memorable OPs and endings from Japanese bands Nightmare and Maximum the Hormone, the original music was made by Yoshihisa Hirano and Hideki Taniguchi. Particularly impressive to me is the work of the latter, whose contributions to anime include the OST for Ultimate Survivor Kaiji. In general, the music from Deathnote still gives me goosebumps to this day. The duo produced something absolutely chilling with Deathnote, and the themes that play throughout the pivotal moments of the series to this day remain iconic, reaching beyond even their original uses. Now, when I say beyond their original uses, I'm brought to another thing about Deathnote that makes it particularly special, and that's its influence on meme culture. While many people are not directly familiar with the work, a great number of people have been exposed to iconic scenes, including the infamous potato chip line. Deathnote has cemented its place in anime history among Western fans in particular, thanks to moments like this one, which are only possible thanks to the tone and attitude set by the show and the incredible performance of its voice cast. Speaking of the cast, I am specifically referring to the cast of the English dub. While many anime of the period had questionable dub quality, I firmly believe that Deathnote is without a doubt one of the best English dubs ever made. While not every single line delivery is perfect, the overall package and general casting choices made were of the highest tier. Every voice fits so perfectly and in some cases surpasses the choices made by the Japanese dub. In particular, I think of Ryuk and L as being incredibly fun to listen to every single chance either of them has a line to deliver. Other characters easily overlooked like Aizawa also managed to evoke incredible emotional response through the incredible acting choices made in the recordings. It's also worth noting that while the series is generally very dramatic and serious, there are also plenty of instances where perfect comedic timing and suspension of disbelief turn this otherwise very serious series into a belly laugh. It just works so perfectly, and it's painstakingly obvious that this anime was dubbed with care. When I think of Deathnote today, many things come to my mind. Firstly, I remember the time in which it aired, what it was like to watch it every week while also trying to keep up with episodes I missed, and how pervasive it was in the local anime community. It felt like everyone had seen it, particularly because it aired on Adult Swim, which basically guaranteed viewership among a relatively mainstream audience in the US. On top of that, it seemed like everyone also unanimously loved it. Some of the most popular pieces of merchandise available at the time were the replica Deathnotes you could buy at a convention. And speaking of conventions, it was almost impossible to go to a single con without running into at least one person, if not several, cosplaying as L, with or without any shoes on. Despite all of that, it's been over 10 years since the show aired, and I would wager that a lot of people who only began watching anime in the last few years completely missed out on this one. Deathnote, in its original manga and anime presentations, doesn't really extend much beyond its initial run. It's a complete story from start to finish, and one that doesn't drag on like series whose episode counts exceed 100 with ease. While there were some prequel stories released featuring characters like L, and a one-shot whose events briefly served as a bonus content for the main story, they've got very little to do with Deathnote and more to do with developing backstories or an epilogue for the characters that already exist, and on top of that, they were all released before 2010. Unlike the manga and anime, however, the series has continued to receive several adaptations in Japan in other formats, particularly live action, with movies, musicals, and even a web series. In 2017, Netflix also distributed a live-action film set in the United States, based loosely on the original manga. Now, much to my surprise, after I started planning this video, I found out that there's actually a new one-shot about Deathnote being created by series artist Takeshi Obata. What this really means is that interest in the IP may just be at the prime point for a proper revival. With this in mind, I'd like to start bringing things home with a single statement. You should really watch Deathnote. To me, Deathnote is one of those absolute must-watch series. It's something that introduced a concept that, when I was a middle schooler, was incredibly cool, but even after watching it again now in adulthood, still holds up just as well if not better. I don't enjoy the game of cat and mouse any less than I did before, and the incredible visuals coupled with audio direction that still evokes goosebumps even when you know what's going to happen is something everyone should experience. If you're looking for an anime that you'll never forget, go check out Deathnote. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel for more content. Also, be sure to turn on the notification bell so that you know when new uploads are coming. As for those of you already subscribed to the channel, thank you. Together, we can build a whole new world. A special thanks to my patrons who support the channel every month. If you'd like to join them and see your name here in the credits, please visit my Patreon at patreon.com/Stanpai to learn more. If you'd like to hear more of my opinions about anime and the like, be sure to check out some of the other videos here on my channel. Lastly, be sure to let me know what you thought of this video and what you think of Deathnote in the comments below. I'm really curious to find out how many anime fans have or have not seen it, so please add whether or not you've actually watched it in the comments section. Until next time, this is Stanpai. Arrivederci.